So I want to just say thank you all for coming and for your patience waiting for me then as well, and for giving up your time to come on my show, but also just for the work, what I believe is a worthy cause of healing the patriarchy with love. So thank you for coming and joining me for that. I just want to kind of give the audience a little bit of background, because this is the first time I've done the show in this format. So I just sort of want to talk them through a little bit about what's happening, because my regular listeners might find it a bit unusual, that's all. So this is going to be a video, and I've invited a panel of women to come and join and talk about the topic of grief. And normally I just interview, a maximum of 1 or 2 people in an episode, and normally it's only audio. So this will be available as a video on Spotify and potentially on YouTube. So some people will be watching it, and then some people will be listening to it, because I'm going to also put it as an audio on Apple and Google and Amazon and some other platforms as well. We'll feed it through to as many as possible to reach as many people as possible. So I'm just going to refer to people as the audience. Normally they would be listeners, so it's just kind of to take in the viewers and the listeners. Now, if you're a viewer, you might find that I'm over commentating what's happening, and that's just because some people will be listening on audio, and if they're listening on audio, they might just need a little bit more information than what you need. Okay, so how does everybody feel about just kind of introducing yourselves a little bit one by one to the audience? Do you feel okay to do that? Yeah. So should we, Claire, do you feel ready to start and just kind of introduce yourself and just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, where you're based, that kind of thing?
Oh, hello. I'm Claire and I'm based in London, but I do quite a lot of the time scoot off down to Devon. So I'm between a city and a rural life. I'm currently collaborating with Trista and the Girl God books on an upcoming anthology called The Wounded Feminine, Grieving with Goddess. So this is great for me to take part in. So thank you very much for having me. My background's in the arts and magazines, but recently I've been moving towards feminism and the mystical, and with a kind of accessing creativity at the core, really, of what I'm trying to do. So that's me. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a regular contributor at Girl God Books, Majo Books, and I've got a column at RTME magazine. So the subject of sort of goddess feminism is really in my heart. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was lovely, Claire. And this is the first time that I've met Claire as well. So it was really nice for me just to get to know you a little bit more there as well, Claire. Thank you for that. And yeah, perfect timing for the anthology. Hey, it sounds great. Arlene, do you feel ready to introduce yourself a little bit? Oh, I think you just need to unmute.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
I'm Bailey, and I live in the U.S., deep in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. So it's quite rural, but it's really lovely. The ancestral lands of the Philology, better known as the Cherokee. I'm an anthropologist by training, and spent many years in many different countries working with women. About 10 years ago, I began writing. I've written all my life, but I really began writing 10 years ago. And then I met Trista, sort of lost track now, how many books we've done together. But yeah, that's been real opening for me. And I love working with girls on books because my passion now is I always say I'm not a woman on a quest to know the deepest love. And I want other women to know that as well. So I have a Facebook page that's called Her Sacred Wild, and it's about women rewilding their wild souls, rewilding themselves. And I'm starting some group work in the fall, and working with Trista on the women's sovereignty and body autonomy to get that out soon. So yeah, lots of projects going on. That my biggest passion is helping women remember that innately they have a wild soul. That's where they should be leading. Yep, where they can be. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh no, thank you for coming, Arlene. I love to hear about you as well, because again, we've only just met, haven't we? And I particularly like that rewilding the feminine. Yes, big yes to that. So thank you. Trista, do you feel ready to introduce yourself?
I can do that. Hi, I'm Trista Hendren. I'm the founder of Girl God Books. I have a very different background for like banking, finance, and I came to this work about 12 years ago. My daughter actually sort of pushed me into it because I was raising her as a feminist, but also in an interfaith household, both Muslim and Christian. But I realized through her that that was really doing her a disservice. And so I wrote my first book in response to a conversation that we had when she was 5. And then the ideas just kept coming, and I kept meeting all these wonderful women from all over the world, like Arlene and Claire, and I have, I think, over 50 books now. So it's been lots and lots of things, but it's been a wonderful journey. So thank you for having me on.
Honestly, thank you. And that's the first time I've met Trista as well, so it was lovely to hear that. And I've been following Trista's page on Facebook, Girl God Books, for years. And so this is like a dream come true for me to have you free here with me. So thank you for allowing me that honor. I really appreciate it. So what happened was I work very intuitively, so similar really to what you three have been talking about. Is kind of like following the path of the feminine, the intuition, and just kind of that deep knowing. And I had a deep knowing with this podcast that I needed to kind of do special one-offs every now and again, and I'm kind of going to fit them in with the wheel of the year, I think, because my life tends to flow that way, as it does for many women. And the intuition came to me to do one about grief. And at the time I was kind of like, I mean, okay, I'll follow my intuition because I always do. And it's not always logical, but it didn't make sense at the time. But as it happens, I'm actually grieving now. So, and that's quite a recent thing. So the timing has ended up being, perfect timing for this, really. So that was kind of like the heart-based intuition thing that's kind of led us all to be together. But the kind of the head part really is that, because patriarchy is inherently based on a lie, because it's based on inequality, and the ultimate truth of this planet is that everything comes from the divine, so everything is equal. I feel that patriarchy just distorts everything that it touches, because it's been a lie that's been around for centuries. And so it becomes, when a lie has been around for centuries, it becomes an illusion that, many people either can't see or maybe they even buy into it. And I know everybody's on a different path with that and at different places. But because it distorts everything that it touches, it also distorts things like, people's view of grief, people's beliefs around grief, how people grieve, A very simple example of that would just be that, you know, it affects all genders insofar as patriarchy doesn't want women to grieve, because if women are grieving, they're taken out of the equation and they can't be used and abused. Essentially, they can't be slaves. If they're, you know, if we're grieving properly, we can't be slaves. So it doesn't like grief because of that. But also it doesn't like men to grieve because that's them being weak, you know, and not being men. And you can see that it's this kind of out of balance, controlling, manipulative, abusive energy that comes with patriarchy that kind of runs through it, that makes things like grieving, it oppresses the grieving process. So what I really want to do today, and I'm so grateful to have you here as what I consider you to be sort of like wisdom keepers of the planet kind of thing. So I'm so grateful to have you here today to help to bring to light the truth about grief and to bust some of the myths that patriarchy has planted into the planet around grief. You know, just ridiculous things like within 2 weeks of somebody's death, you should be, you know, fully functioning at work, you know, and many places of employment will give somebody 1 to 2 days compassionate leave. I mean, how they can even call that compassionate? It's just what, you know, most people that lose somebody close to them 1 to 2 days, they're probably still in shock and never mind to then just go back to work and get on with things. And, you know, I think another one that really gets me is that there's this idea that after 2 years, grief just ends miraculously. I mean, who comes up with these timescales, really? You know, so it's kind of things like that patriarchy has put in place that aren't true, aren't kind, and aren't compassionate leave, that I would like to talk about today. And I would really love to get your candid and raw, and as Arlene said, wild feminine views on this. And I welcome all your views and all your beliefs and all your perspectives on it. And I hope that we can just have a really good discussion about it and bring to light the truth. So can we maybe begin with just talking about what your experiences of grief have been like for yourselves? And this can either be personal or your generic, wherever your comfort and your boundary is with talking about grief, that's absolutely fine with me. So I just thought it would be good if you could talk about kind of the somatic body experience of grief, how it affects life, how it touches everything, that kind of thing. So kind of, I'm talking about the kind of the real feminine essence that is in grief. Does anybody kind of want to start and maybe talk about that a bit? And to put your hand up if you want to start. Just want to, Claire, yeah, do you want to go then, Claire, and just tell us a bit?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that in general, without being put into a situation where you're actually grieving, women within patriarchy are actually grieving anyway, whether they realize it or not. I was lucky enough to do a mental health course with a friend of mine who was chairing it, and he said that he talked about the stress cup being full when you're overwhelmed. And I actually think that women's grief cup is full. So, and that's from the wounding. And then the reason why we called the anthology The Wounded Feminine is because it's an archetype that we all of us are, even if we don't realize it. And I've just made a few notes. I'm just going to read them out. And I'm sorry if I'm going to come across as being a bit wooden, but this is quite an important subject. I don't want to miss anything. So I've just said it's an archetype in anguish, describing deep psychological, emotional, and spiritual scarring of a generational trauma created by the patriarchal betrayal of women, which is a cycle in perpetuation. So it's almost like anything that's added to what we're already experiencing, whether we're aware of it or not. It's actually quite a burden, and maybe later I'll talk about the physical impact on the endocrine system and all the rest of it. So thank you very much for letting me say that.
Yeah. Oh, Claire, that was such a good point, because I feel like I'm always grieving. And actually, I had a friend come. It was my birthday last week, and my friend came, and I was kind of crying a bit on and off. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm grieving." And she did actually say to me, "You're always grieving." I know, I know. There's always something that I'm grieving, but I hadn't really thought about it in terms of we're all grieving because we're in a patriarchal society, which is damaging to us and painful for us to exist in. So thank you so much, Claire, for bringing that up, because that's so true. And I'm sure that's something that, our audience, will be able to resonate with, and perhaps like me, they've just kind of had a light bulb moment and gone, oh yeah, that's it. That is what's happening. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Does anybody else want to share their ideas on grief and how it's experienced? And has anybody else got anything?
I can.
Arlene?
Yeah. This may be all over the place, and I apologize for that. As part of the, I came of age in the 60s and early 70s. And so I would say throughout my lifetime, there's been a sense of collective grief. Whether it was, from different wars that we were in, the fight for women's rights, trying to create a world where we as women had the same opportunities as men did, if we had the same education. And again, I mentioned earlier, I'm an anthropologist by training, and that's what my work in the world was. And I was constantly battling, that mentality that this was a man's job. Even though I was specifically working with women regarding women's health care, I was still constantly battling. Personally, my mother died a few days after my 26th birthday, very suddenly. I didn't really, at that age, I didn't know how to grieve. The grief was there, but I didn't really understand. I didn't have an embodied knowing of grief at 26 years old. And I've had other, relatives and friends die throughout the years. But I'll try not to get into emotions with age. 2 years ago, with no warning, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and given 2 to 4 months to live. He actually lived 9 months, but I say lived with quotes. He was alive for life. I know myself very well. The only children we have are fur and 4 feet. I'm not a caregiver. And I went into the whole experience saying that I'm not a caregiver, I'm not a caregiver. And yet again, living rurally and living in a very rural county, there was very little support from hospice. We had hospice, very little support. My grief began the minute that diagnosis was handed to me. And very, very, very unlike me, something told me to create a group of my women friends, because that's predominantly what I have, was to create a group that was just be called, I don't even remember them exactly, something about, a healing. And I don't know how I would have gotten through those 9 months without the women in that circle. I wrote a lot. I have a compilation of 34, maybe 40 different writings called the Death Writing that I will publish, because they are so antithetical to the mainstream idea of grief and the mainstream idea of how you're supposed to act and how long you're supposed to act. And there was a lot of contradictions during that 9-month time. What I've really experienced was the fact that it's now, I am now 19 months beyond my death. And my grief is worse now than it was in the beginning. And people don't understand that. People, well, what do you mean you're still grieving? It's almost 2 years. It's been 2 years since the diagnosis. You should be over this. Well, no, you can't do that. That's not the way we do things in this country. It's all these things you can't do, and all the books that make the transition to death seem like this beautiful, amazing thing if you just play the right songs and read the right poetry, read the right authors. And so tell me now if I have to watch my language, because I tend to have, okay, good, because that's fucking ridiculous. It's like, well, if you just ask God for help, well, first of all, God does not exist in my world. I talk to Goddess all the time, but it in that whole grief cycle, you're dealing with the family of your beloved, who is very religious. There's all these little components that come in, and it's patriarchy. It's patriarchy telling us this is how grief is handled. Anything outside this nice little neat container is not acceptable. I fought that. I'm still fighting that. And that has become a passion of mine as well. It's like, so what if it's 2 years later? I met my husband the first night I was at university. On August 17th of this year, that will be 52 years ago. We married 2 years later. August 17th will be my 50th wedding anniversary. We made it 48 years. You don't just turn off your feelings. You don't just, oh, well, okay, it's been 2 years. I'm okay now. Or it's been 2 months or 2 weeks or even going through the process. People will say, oh, well, just, they'll say, pat your hand and say, it's okay. He's going to be in a better place. We don't know that. Or just, let's just give him some more medication. He won't feel it. Again, we don't really know what they feel. I know before Larry was drugged to the point that he didn't have much conversation. And we would have the most amazing conversations this morning. Because I would say, well, where'd you go? Who did you see? If he was already starting to cross the veil. and he was starting, to see his parents and other people that had lost him years ago. And the mainstream medical community and his family was like, he's delusional, he really needs a medical. Like, no. When he feels like he needs to be medicated, it is his choice. That's the other thing that I found very patriarchal, was the fact that the person who was dying had no choice. And what the medical system decided was the way to handle it. Right, but I could go on for days about how patriarchy makes death and grieving so much harder than it needs to be.
Thank you, Arlene. And I'm so sorry about your husband and about the patriarchal systems that do indeed make death, the process of dying and grief, harder. And it's already difficult enough. Thank you for such a raw and honest share. And you've brought up some very valid issues there that I hope we can maybe touch on a bit more later on. Thank you. Trista, do you have anything that you want to share on the experiences of grief?
I am a bit emotional after, especially Arlene's share. It's interesting that you said that you are also in grief yourself right now, because I am as well. My cousin, who's 3 months younger than me, passed 10 days ago. And going back to some of what Arlene said, I think I grieved when as soon as she said pancreatic cancer, I knew, okay, that's it. But she was supposed to live 3 months and she made it 9, and it was absolute hell for her. And yeah, just really, really, really horrible. So I would say, although I'm grieving in some way, I think I did my grieving early on. It's like, okay, this is not fair. We're too young to die. But that I also felt this sense of relief for her that she wasn't suffering so much anymore. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for the system that we live in with how we deal with death. And I've said to a couple of my close friends, if I had a different calling or a bit more time, I would be very drawn to be a death doula, because I cared for 3 of my grandparents before they passed for many, many months. And I actually like caregiving. For me, I found that was just as meaningful as giving birth to my children. But I definitely think it's not for everybody. It's really, really tough work. And it probably, some of why I like it is because I was socialized so well into patriarchy that, being a mother and being a caregiver, I mean, I can definitely see where it has cost me a lot. But I do feel like that was a really meaningful time for me with all 3 of my grandparents, and I'm grateful that I had it. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you again, Trista, for again, another very honest and open share and a raw share. And I'm sorry about your cousin. Gosh, yeah, there's so much in the system, isn't there, that kind of is unsupportive. And actually it's worse than that, because being unsupportive is one thing, but I think actually creating more pain within an already painful situation is a step beyond being unsupportive. And that's kind of what I've been hearing amongst that, really, is that, patriarchy is adding pain on top of pain, really, unnecessarily. And I just wonder what we can do about that. I don't know where you're at, because I know we've just had quite a raw share, so I don't want to kind of move things on too quickly. If anybody needs a little moment, then I'm happy to do that. Claire, have you got something to say? Do you want to come and talk? Is that why you're holding your hand up? Yeah, come on. Come on.
I just wanted to add to maybe more of a step back observation on what everyone has just been saying, which are very personal experiences. Again, I'm going to read this because it's just succinct. Patriarchy has done terrible things to vulnerable women, and that's grieving women included. Predators tune in. Some want your body, some want your soul. And this is from experience. So I don't understand, or I don't see how, unless women remove themselves from the patriarchal space, how they can grieve properly and make sense of the unbearable painfulness of being. And I've coined the phrase male theism, which is like monotheism, but just with men theism, because it's a system that fears emotion and shames the vulnerable. And actually women are surviving in this system, and public and psychological space are actually male space, and they deny the female experience. So really, in the general space, only male language is spoken. And I think, you know, we can see that through Mary, who's, you know, the icon that's given back to women. And she's silent. She's an icon in silence. And actually, you can't grieve in silence. You need to verbalize. So, you know, and I've just said this, when state and religion collude to cement masculine power and undermine and control women, it makes sense to look to a spiritual age before patriarchy even existed, where the goddess held power. So, you know, I think there is a positive to be taken from this, and it's up to us to try and create change.
Mm. Yeah, I agree that everywhere there's kind of set up, isn't it, for the masculine. It's not set up for women, for woman to exist within it. And that is painful, and that itself causes grief. And as we've been saying, it causes pain on top of pain that's not necessary. What I'm sort of feeling into now is that maybe we're moving a bit more into kind of what you just touched on there, Claire. You know, we can't just exist within this patriarchal system because it's damaging women. So what do we do about it? Do we just set up communities of just women? Just, you know, I mean, I'm just throwing ideas out there, you know. What do we do? Has anybody got kind of solutions or ideas that they want to share, or maybe even if you want to talk a little bit more about kind of how difficult it is to exist within a patriarchal system and be grieving, if anybody maybe wants to talk about that. But I'm open to talking about that, or solutions, whatever's kind of there for you, if anybody's got something on that. Arlene, yeah.
Dorey and I were both raised Southern Baptist, and we both overcame it, as we put it. And he became, you know, interested in druidry and became a druid. I was, you know, I mean, I went through different cycles. I mean, particularly, you know, witch, the goddess woman. You know, I'm a feminist at heart, and goddess is my spiritual tradition. And that's the easiest way to say that. And it was for him too. And he and I spent hours talking about how his death, what he was, and everything. And then the fight began with his family, who is very religious, and my sister's married to a country Baptist preacher, which that makes it worse than if it was an educated, large city patron. But Larry and I, we built altars. While he was still able to walk around by, we built altars. We already had altars outside. We had 18 acres. And we had, just different little vignettes here and there as you walk through the woods. But we built even more altars. We built altars in our house. And we had to fight. I had to fight his family when they would come, because my sister quit speaking to me because of the altars in my. Now, these are not, they're beautiful spaces with beautiful things, at least to us, but it was just the fact that, they'd want to come and pray over Larry. And he said, please don't let them do that. And I said, I won't. I'll fight them. Hospice wanted to send out, clergy. And I said, no, we don't. That is not our belief system. But from every side, it was a constant fight. And, I felt like I needed to have imprinted on my forehead, we are choosing the death experience, not just we. My husband is choosing the death experience that he wants. And he has a right to it. I don't care what patriarchy says. I don't care what the rules are. I don't care what the standard mode of operating in the system is. That is not our belief. We are not part of the patriarchy. And then when I would say that Larry's beliefs were, Druidic and my beliefs were goddess oriented, which really they both just kind of blended together, people would be just utterly horrified. And then they would start, of course, the whole hell conversation. And I'm like, quit stopping. We don't believe in hell. You can stand here and talk all day, but we don't believe. That is not our belief system. But I had to fight for that with everybody, with the doctors, with hospitals, with their family. And I just wanted, everybody says you need to write a book. And I'm like, and if I can go back through that, because there's he and I would talk about how dying could be so different. Be handled differently. If we could just step out of patriarchy for a moment. I don't know what that's going to take, because it's all so embedded. When we said he wasn't, when he said he wasn't going to have a funeral, again, everybody was horrified. I said, he doesn't want one. But that's what you're supposed to do. About that phrase a lot. Well, this is what you're supposed to do when this happens. That is what patriarchy says you're supposed to do. We choose to be different. That is not our belief. Patriarchy is not our belief. And again, even all the books that tell you how to deal with grief through it all miss so much. I mean, because they're coming out of patriarchal beliefs, coming out of patriarchal religion. And I don't know. Wow, I don't know how we get beyond that other than individually. That's enough.
Thank you, Arlene. That gave a real insight into that, that kind of battle that you were in when it was love and the freedom to just be your individual selves as you were. And I could really sense this. It was almost like an attack from all these different angles, and not really the space to breathe within the process. And I guess that is what patriarchy does, because it just is so controlling. I always find it very controlling, patriarchy, and it's got this kind of like one track, and anything that doesn't go along with that one track is going to get run over, basically. You know, it's kind of seen as wrong, instead of, you know, the goddess is more for me, you know, this kind of divine feminine, or however you want to think of it, this healed world without patriarchy is a much more open space. It feels like there's people are free to be the individuals that they are and express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves, and that doesn't look like, you know, what it might look, the mainstream looks like today. And many people, I feel, just go along with the mainstream and maybe don't even realize that it doesn't fit them. I think they don't even realize it, because it's been so, you know, hammered into us that this is how we should be. And as you so beautifully shared, that's okay, go on.
It's so ingrained, regardless of what precipitates the grief, the way we handle grief, and the way we had, you know, the process going through grief. There's a nice little box that what is acceptable is putting, and if you don't take your cue from all those little pieces of paper in that very acceptable little box, then you're wrong. So you're fighting multiple things. You know, you're trying to deal with the grief while people are telling you the way you're dealing with it is wrong, and you're trying to carve out your niche that works for you. And again, patriarchy is still telling you, well, you need to do this, you need to do this. I don't know how many times I told hospice I didn't want to be in their grief because I knew that it would be religious based. And I didn't want to have to deal with the grief and deal with the religion and try to explain where I was coming from, only to know I would be looked at as evil. I mean, it's this ball of wax that's got so many pieces to it, and it's so glued together. And honestly, I don't know how that ever changes, but for me, it changes with each one of us stepping up and saying, no, that's not my belief system. That's not the way I live or work.
Yeah. I can feel that. I can really feel that, actually, that, you know, each person that says no and does it differently the way that you did is actually seeding the change, you know, one of the necessary changes. So thank you for doing that, Arlene. Thank you for being a trailblazer in very difficult circumstances. And Trista, are you wanting to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say that all of this goes to show just how deeply ingrained patriarchy is. Even, you know, I'm here in Bergen, Norway, coming from Portland, Oregon, but it's, you know, people always say, oh, but I'm not religious and it doesn't have that big of effect on me and whatever. But when you get to death experiences, or, you know, it's almost always at a church, you come back, you sing the same, you know, Christian songs mostly. If you're, you know, most people here are Christian anyway. But it reminded me too of when my mother's mom passed, that she was a staunch atheist and did not want anything to do with, you know, hospice, the same thing, pushing all this church crap on her. And she just wanted none of it. And it even actually, she had a horrible death story because she had thought that she was on assisted suicide and called everyone to the house to say goodbye. And then hospice came. She had had a born again Christian doctor who never put in the paperwork for her. So he didn't believe in that, but he didn't bother to give her the respect of telling her that. So the last 10 days of her life were just an absolute living hell. And yeah, I could go on and on about that, but I remember sitting there with her and trying to and this is before my whole journey with Girl, God, and Goddess and everything, but I've always sang, and I was trying to sing soothing songs to her and just trying to think of songs that weren't religious, that were soothing, and it was hard. And we've come out with now one revised hymnal and one solstice Christmas songs, because I think really we have to, in terms of like what we can do, we have to change the way we think about things. And some of us, I wasn't for a long time either. We're not even aware of what we think.
Oh, you're just breaking up a little bit there.
Well,
Sorry,
I'll leave it to someone else then.
Oh. Oh no, I was enjoying that. I'm so sorry, Trista.
No,
You just broke
okay.
up a little bit.
But it's so frustrating if I try to talk and you can't hear me anyway. So
okay. Well, thank you for that story about your mother's death as well. And that sounds awful. It's hard to believe that these things go on, but we know that they do. And yes, I hear you as well about the songs. It's difficult sometimes to pick out what to do with people during their death. I've been with my male relatives when they've died. And I don't know why it's just men, but it's just the men in the family. I'm with them when they die. And it's always been really quite hard to know how to approach it, because I've been quite young when I've been with my granddads. I was quite young, and then my dad, that was like in 2017, but I had quite a difficult relationship with my dad, so that was difficult for other reasons. And he had been brought up quite a strict Christian, but then had dropped religion altogether, so I didn't have a basis really for how to be with him in his death. So I know what you mean. It's kind of like we're almost kind of pulling things just out of our intuition, aren't we, when we're trying to create our own process for grief, because it's been so oppressive. And again, the dying process, which you talked about assisted dying there as well with your mother. I think everything has become so set, and that's that box that Arlene was talking about, that to try and step outside of that and do what you feel is right for you and whoever it is that you're with that is either dying or grieving. It's difficult to source the creative ideas sometimes, I feel, because everything is geared towards, as everybody's mentioned here, towards patriarchy and religion and the very set mainstream and standard way of doing things. And the way of the goddess is not set like that, is it? It's her very nature is creative, and she's the one that creates all the different possibilities within the universe, and everything is birthed through her. So to have these tight boxes and constrictive rules and regulations, and people who as you've just mentioned there about that born again Christian doctor, I just thought overriding people's rights in order to defend their patriarchal views is quite shocking, but I guess that does go on. And how do we deal with that? I mean, what happened, Trista? How did you deal with that when that happened? Did you speak?
I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to clarify that it was my mother's mom who passed, not my mom. My mom is very much alive.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
No, she'll think it's
hysterical.
hysterical.
No, I'm so sorry.
No.
Oh,
Don't.
God.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, just so she listens to it. She's like, yeah.
Oh no.
But I think you
Trista's
do
mum,
the
I'm
thing.
so sorry.
I think for me, laughter is a good way to deal with things also. But no, I don't have a good answer as to how we deal with. We had to just wait it out, and it was torture for everybody to see her pass that way, because she was always such a strong woman, and they took away all her dignity and all her choices, and it was just absolutely horrifying. So
That's a very patriarchal death, isn't it? A death where the person's rights are taken from them. Yeah, that's very patriarchal. Hi, Claire, do you want to speak?
Yes, I do actually. So I think what you're talking about is really interesting, which is assisting the dying. And obviously it's something that none of us are trained for. I mean, priests are, but we've already discussed that actually this isn't necessarily the route that, you know, we want to go down. Obviously there's the goddesses of necromancy like Isis, and one of her functions is to assist the dying, but it's also to assist the living. But I just wanted to talk about patriarchal death. So one of the things that happened when my father was dying and I was there was that he used me to offload all of this stuff. And it was almost like he was giving himself a free pass for all of his behavior and chucking it on me. Like the guilt was put on me. And I just thought, well, now I'm absorbing your, excuse me, crap. And I didn't like it. And then another male relative had then tried to do the same thing for me. And I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I literally put my foot down because I've been there before. So it's almost like even in death, men have the upper hand, even in their weakest moment. But when my grandfather was dying, I was with him for 2 weeks and we played chess, and I was a child. I'd never beat him at chess. I was going to win, and then he had like some kind of stroke in the middle of the game, and then kind of went like that and went blue. And I was like thinking, you know, my 10-year-old stuff, oh good, I'm going to win. And then he just came out and went checkmate, and he won it, you know, he won anyway. And it just seems to me that's quite a good description of how, you know, patriarchy sets men up. The system is there for men to win at all angles, and it shouldn't be a question of winning or losing. It should be a question of being and coexisting in harmony at all times. I mean, with nature and animals and everything. So in terms of, but there is good news. So that I was in Glastonbury. This is how I got the idea that you know, I'm so grateful for Trista for understanding it, that you know, there was a need for a book about grieving with goddess, which I think is one solution, and you know, is to have a space where women talk and where other people who are vulnerable. A book is a very good place when you're vulnerable to retreat into, and into other people's voices. But I've met this man in the cafe in Glastonbury, and he was grieving. He was an old man, and I was drawn to his energy. And I went over and I had lunch with him, with me and my partner. And he had said that, and he was obviously very intelligent. He was a professor, and he'd said, look, I've moved to Glastonbury, and I can feel the female energy. And I know it's the time of the goddess. And I was like, literally, I was going to cry. And I just thought, okay, this energy is out there and men are feeling it. Men maybe when their barriers are down. So, and that's the other thing. When your barriers are down, when you're vulnerable, the barriers between realms, it dissipates and you can see other worlds. And that's when you can talk maybe to the deceased, because your armor isn't up. So that what I'm saying is that there is hope that men very gentle men, and men where they're put into gentle situations pick up on this. And then also that we can see beyond this illusion to something actually really beautiful that we're all part of, which is an energy that's very, very powerful. And I'll mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting about the man in the cafe. Yeah. I mean, we are on a planet that is ascending, and we are all healing, and that does include men. And I do believe that the patriarchal system are dying as part of that. They can't survive because they're not a frequency match. And I guess one of the ways that we can influence it is energetically, because it's really difficult, I find. And I think we've really touched on this by talking about some of these dying processes and being grief stricken in systems that don't fit. The kinds of human battling against it doesn't kind of work. You can feel it's heavy, it's painful, it's difficult. It just doesn't feel like it budges the same as if, you know, you kind of feel into the energy of it, which I think is kind of what you were talking about, Claire, there. And if you feel into the energy and the frequency, you can feel that, you know, things are at a tipping point. I feel it always feels a bit like the scales are about to tip for me in terms of this kind of divine feminine goddess energy. I think, you know, it is kind of here on the planet, and yes, even men are picking up on it now. Women, of course, are maybe more finely attuned to it anyway, naturally. But yeah, I think other genders are picking up on that, and I think that's a positive. And I think that is one way in which we can patriarchy. So it's things like you say, like books, because books, as I'm sure all of you know, are like their own little entity, aren't they? They have their own kind of life and their own energy. And even as you're writing, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and kind of it feels like it's got its own soul almost. And sometimes I feel like I'm kind of riding the wave, the energetic wave of it, rather than being the writer. It's kind of almost already there, and I'm just bringing it into form. So I think, you know, these kind of things like books existing in the world, which you're all doing on great scales, and art existing in the world, which again, you know, I know that you're taking part in. It's those kind of things that actually can influence the energy of the world, and I think can infiltrate these patriarchal structures that seem so tough and so embedded that you don't feel like you can budge them. But I think with, you know, energy, perhaps you can. I mean, does anybody else have anything to say on that, or any other ideas of how we can kind of influence patriarchy without, you know, banging our head against a brick wall kind of thing? Trista?
One of my overall goals and dreams is to have a goddess community center, initially starting in Bergen, but also all over the world, where children can come and learn about the goddess, have an art museum, bookstore, library. But one of the things that I've come up into recently was to have grieving rooms for people who've lost someone, women who have miscarried or had abortions, women who have been raped or sexually assaulted, because we don't have places. We have women's circles, but we don't have a place where you can come and always be warmly welcomed, and, you know, where people know how to work with you in ritual, or just sit with you or hold you, or whatever it is that you need. Because I think when we have that in the whole world, and I am hopeful that we have churches everywhere, we have mosques and synagogues, we need goddess centers. So that's my big goal.
Wow. Sorry, I'm starting to cry. I love that. Absolutely love that. I've been touched by that. That's beautiful. I can get behind that, definitely. Yeah, and then that's kind of like the same way churches have been built in these big buildings, and they contain the energy of that, you know, and kind of almost grounding the energy of religion and therefore patriarchy. Yeah, to have somewhere really beautiful like that, that's based on compassion and the sort of like the more feminine attributes, caring, compassion, nurturing, kindness. Not that men don't have those attributes, but they are kind of, I'm talking about the essence, the kind of like the yin, rather than it being assigned to a gender as such. And I think, yeah, to have those kinds of grounded and built into our reality as a place where everybody can go and kind of catch on to that energy as well is a great idea. And that's definitely one that I feel would work. That's a brilliant dream to have, Trista. I hope that does really come true for you. Has anybody else got anything they want to add about Arlene, what we can do?
Well, I was just thinking, and I'm saying, like, Trista, I love that idea. It's, like we slowly plant the seed that for something else to grow beyond patriarchy. And it's with these beautiful spaces where women can come regardless of what is happening in their life. I think for me, kind of another, I don't voice this very often because it's usually not taken well. But I think one way to start to shift the energy, as you were saying, from everything being so patriarchal to more goddess energy, is losing the gender terms. I look, hang with me for a second. I look to nature. I look to goddess for my wisdom and my way of seeing things. And I think, and I've looked to her a lot through grief. And I think, why, when we have a strong wind, we don't say, oh, wow, that was the male wind. Or we have a gentle breeze, we don't call it, a feminine. We don't say, well, this aspect of nature is male, this aspect of nature is female. It's just nature. It's just, humans are the ones that need to genderize it. And if we could, my personal perspective, and kind of also part of my raison d'etre is, if we please get rid of the gender terms. We just have this person cry. Let's forget the men don't cry thing. Humans cry. Humans grieve. It's not right. I've been told so many times. I remember when my mom died, my dad, everybody would tell my dad, oh, you're so strong. It's so nice that you're not grieving, and I'm thinking, no, he needs to grieve. My brother, who was an Air Force pilot, was like, well, I can't show my grief. Like, of course you can't. No, I can't. I mean, we're deeply embedded in the ultra patriarchal system there. But I know when I work with women, I used to do women's circles. After I left the UN, where I was working with the UN Women in Development program in developing countries, when I retired from that, I did a bunch of different training, priestess training, and 2 different ones. And then also I studied plant notes. So I wound up having women's circles and then teaching plant notes. Botany was my minor in university. And we talked a lot about that. and women were like, why can't our world be like this? Why do we have to think that? Actually, most of the time they said, we're never going to get rid of patriarchy if we constantly add a gender to everything. Because men are never going to be able to, most men are never going to be able to tap into their feelings, because that's not what a man does. A man must be strong and, protective, and heaven forbid, whatever, God is forbid is actually what he's why I said heaven. That a woman come along and show the the strengths that we would normally attribute to a man. I am so thankful for my goddess friends who are of the Amazonian nature, and who, come right in. And I mean, right after Larry died, I was so lost. Two of my girlfriends who are like that came right in and said, we're taking over. This is what we're going to do. You don't have to, you have enough to think about with just all the paperwork. We're going to take care of everything else. They just took control. We don't normally see, whether it's in grief or whatever, looking through that patriarchal lens, we don't normally see things like that happen. It's usually like, well, you need to get the men in your family to take care of this, and the women in your family can cook. They can bring food, as though there's not anything else they can do. And that is, I don't know, for me, in eradicating patriarchy, not even moving into the religious aspect of it, because it's which came first, religion or patriarchy, kind of hard to say. It's allowing humans to just be human, without having to say, oh, wow, you're being, one of my sisters-in-law said, you need to quit being so male. Your energy is so male. And I said, well, I'm having to fight the system in order to get what my husband needs, because nobody's listening to him, because he's sick, and therefore, obviously, he can't think for himself, according to them. So, of course, I would step in just like any woman. But then I was, so many times described as being, quit being an angry woman. Why can't I just be a strong woman? I don't have to be good. And I thought, okay. And I have to say, there are really good men out there. And Larry taught me a lot. Larry was a sociology professor. And he taught gender roles, death and dying, and of course, that, he would, his goal in the classroom was to just totally upend the whole patriarchal idea, who was what and how things should be done. And I guess I'm kind of the same way, just maybe I love the fact that I love what Claire is doing. I love the fact what Trista is doing, and giving women around the world a voice. They know there's got to be.
Thank you for bringing that up, Arlene. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like patriarchy kind of likes to divide things, doesn't it? Likes to create division, and you can do that very easily by labeling things and placing expectations upon things and people. And yeah, and I can see as well that, fifth dimensional consciousness is an embodiment of the goddess, to me anyway. That's how I see it. And within that, everything just is, doesn't need to be labeled or separated or projected upon. So yeah, I see what you mean. And interestingly, I saw these little baby clothes the other day. It was like an advert came up, and it was like, boys will be boys. And then there was one for girls, and it was something about being kind. And I thought, really? We're going to, put that onto very young children?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like automatically, and why can't you get a boys t-shirt that says be kind, and a girls t-shirt that says girls will be girls? And what does that even mean? So yeah, I see where you're coming from. I can see that now. Yeah, thank you for that contribution. Thank you. I feel like, Claire, do you want to say something? Yeah, go on.
Yes. I just wanted to say that, just add to what Trista's been saying, and Arlene really, which is about getting out into the community. So forming, finding your tribe is really important, and finding your space within your tribe. I'm an artist, so I'm a visual thinker, and I wanted to find anger, and I did a meter-long drawing, and there was all the emotions, and right at the end of a meter spiral of various things was anger. So I think people don't necessarily, especially women, they don't really, and men too, because we're all living under this sort of illusion. So I did a series of in the community art projects looking at violence for women, and invited women to submit art about what their idea, whether it's personal experiences or just anything that they wanted to say about violence. And it ended up being a series of 3 with a so the next one I collaborated with a forensic psychologist who had a chapter in his book about ex voto. And ex voto, I mean, obviously that's patriarchal religion, but when you put it in the female realm, it's offerings, it's artistic offerings. So that was the next show, and so that was part of the healing process. And the next one was self-portrait. And actually celebrating your own image as you are is a really, really powerful thing. So I think there's things that we can all be doing, and actually a lot of it is around self-love and energetic healing. But self-love, I think, is one of the most important things that we can do, and then we can live by example. And I think if we live the way that, and I don't do this myself, I think I'm a very hard character, I need to learn to be softer, but if we live our best selves, then other people might notice, and they might think, oh well, how do I do that? So that's sort of where I'm at with getting out in the community. And I love Trista's idea of having the place where people can come, cup of tea, light an incense stick, take you out of your neural pathway that's set in the samskara and bring it out, whether it's with a bing or a gong or, you know, or just a chat. I think it's really, really good. So, and that I'll mute myself.
I'm glad that you said that. Thank you for bringing up self-love, because I do think that's so important. And because we are, you know, or I believe anyway, that we are all connected through love, because we're all born through love. So we're connected races in you know, an unseen way. If we kind of love our own hearts, then I think that has a ripple effect and goes out into the world. And I think you know, if you're kind of around somebody that loves themselves, you can sense that, a bit like being around somebody that doesn't, and you can sense that. And I think it can kind of almost energetically rub off on you a little bit. So I think if we all kind of focus on loving ourselves and loving our own hearts, then that does infuse our whole environment and the people in our lives and around us with that kind of very goddess-like self-love energy, and that can tip things. And yes, I also love Trista's vision. So I feel like we've kind of maybe started to trail off a bit and go into a different kind of elements here. I think grief, maybe we've kind of rounded that up. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to say? No? Are we done then? So I want to give you all the opportunity to just kind of tell the audience where they can find you if they want to contact you, or if they want to see any of your art or buy your books or go on your websites, whatever. So do you want to kind of just one by one, maybe just share where people can, if you want to, of course. If you don't want to share that, you don't have to. And I will also put it into the show notes for people. Does anybody want to share where they can be found? No? Claire, you do? Okay.
Just briefly, I mean, I can be found in the pages of Girl God books and also RTME on e-magazine, and my artistic work can be found at South London Women Artists on their website. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. Arlene?
I wanted to say I can also be found in Girl God books, and I'm also a contributor to RT and monthly contributor. On Facebook, it's For Sacred Wild, Remembering the Wild Soul of Woman, and I'm currently working on a website, and that will just be Her Sacred Wild. Yeah, on Facebook, if you just type in Her Sacred Wild, my page will come up, and it's got a lot of my art, a lot of my writing on it.
Okay, what a gift. Thank you. Let people know where they can find you or Girl God Books.
I'm just going to jump in there for those who don't know what RTM is. It's Return to Mago, and they also have a wonderful Facebook group. So I'd encourage people to check that out as well. And you can find me at thegirlgod.com, or social media is Girl God Books. I handle everything. So thank you so much, Luna.
Okay, yeah,
And
thank
Claire
you.
and Arlene. So
yeah, thank you all for your wonderful contributions, and I feel like I've learned so much, and I feel like I've been absolutely blessed actually to be in your company today and to hear your wisdom and your take on the great. So thank you so much for joining and doing that. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Has anybody got any last thing that they want to say before I end the call?
I wanted to thank you for holding this podcast and being so beautiful while you did it. And I do actually feel quite emotional, so thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you.
I feel the same way. I think it's not. I don't know what I was expecting, but I feel tremendous benefit emanating out from the conversation. And thank you to Claire and Trista.
Yeah, thank you all. Okay. So thank you all for joining, and thank you to our audience as well for coming along and either watching or listening. It's always lovely to have you along, and I hope to be back soon with another one of these. Take care, everybody. It's been lovely to connect. Thank you so much, and many blessings to all of you. Thank you. Bye.